Defense Updates has reached more than 150,000 subscribers. We're genuinely thankful to our viewers. You keep us going. We don't dilute your video watching experience in this channel with sponsored products. If you like what we're doing, kindly support us on Patreon. www.patreon.com/defenseupdates. If a war were to break out on the Korean peninsula over Pyongyang's development of long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles and its thermonuclear weapons development efforts, the resulting conflict would be catastrophic, even if it remained purely conventional. Worse still would be if nuclear weapons were used, which could ultimately escalate into Armageddon. While the devastation that nuclear weapons can wreak onto cities and other population centers is obvious, the use of tactical nuclear weapons is often overlooked. There's a perception that America and allies might suffer huge damage from the effects of electromagnetic pulses, or EMPs, generated by tactical nuclear weapons. In this video, Defense Updates analyzes why the threat of North Korean EMP weapon is overhyped.
Number 5.
An electromagnetic pulse, EMP, also sometimes called a transient electromagnetic disturbance, is a short burst of electromagnetic radiation. A nuclear electromagnetic pulse is the abrupt pulse of electromagnetic radiation resulting from a nuclear explosion. The resulting rapidly changing electric fields and magnetic fields may couple with electronic systems to produce damaging current and voltage surges. The intense gamma radiation emitted can also ionize the surrounding air, creating a secondary EMP as the atoms of air first lose their electrons and then regain them. Nuclear electromagnetic pulse, or NEMP weapons, are designed to maximize such EMP effects as the primary damage mechanism, and some are capable of destroying susceptible electronic equipment over a wide area. NEMP would be detonated in the air at a significant height from the ground, that is, they are airburst.
Number 4.
EMPs can do serious damage of electrical systems that are not specifically hardened to withstand such events. Indeed, U.S. cities as well as U.S. armed forces are particularly vulnerable due to America's reliance on networks and advanced sensor system. Defense analysts and military officials are reluctant to comment openly about the seriousness of the problem due to the level of classification, but they acknowledge that only some U.S. and allied hardware is protected from the effects of an EMP blast. The commercial infrastructure of any modern city is very vulnerable to such a weapon. For example, a powerful EMP attack could render power grids to stop working and plunge the whole city into darkness.
Number 3.
Retired Air Force Lieutenant General David Deptula, Dean of the Mitchell Institute and former Service Intelligence Chief, said, "It would be an additional challenge to overcome. EMP hardening is very expensive, and in the world of the last 25 years of putting reducing costs as a priority over full-spectrum operational capability, it has not been a high priority." Brian Clark, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments, was more direct. "Most of our systems are not hardened against EMP. Some older analog or Cold War era systems are," Clark said. "It's unclear whether a high atmospheric nuclear explosion would cause a significant EMP effect at lower altitudes, and whether North Korea could execute such an attack without also affecting their own capabilities." Mark Gunzinger, an air power analyst at the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments and a former Boeing B-52 strategic bomber pilot, told the National Interest that the Pentagon has been expecting such asymmetric threats but needs funding to address the challenge. Over the last decade, Department of Defense has expressed its own growing concern with hybrid threats posed by potential aggressors with a mix of conventional, unconventional, and asymmetric capabilities, including weapons of mass destruction, Gunzinger said. This will require funding to upgrade DoD's forces and weapon systems, including capabilities that can operate in WMD environments. On the specific issue of North Korea, Gunzinger said that an EMP would affect Pyongyang's force too, but conceded that U.S. forces are probably more vulnerable to such effects. It's likely that North Korea's use of relatively unsophisticated EMP weapon over the Korean peninsula would affect their own forces and possibly their battlespace command and control infrastructure, Gunzinger said. All experts do believe that the vulnerability of non-military commercial infrastructure against EMP is many times more. Keeping these aspects in view, it seems EMP weapons of North Korea could be a real threat, but there are certain aspects which make them very less likely an option.
Number 2.
Even if the North Koreans did resort to using nuclear weapons to target cities and population centers, targeting only Allied military forces or using an EMP blast, it's likely that the US would resort to a nuclear counterstrike. Joshua H. Pollack, editor of the Non-Proliferation Review, is a senior research associate at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies. If someone had a super powerful EMP that fried the North American power grid, do you imagine that the president would just shrug and say, nothing we can do about that? So basically, whether it's an NEMP or a strategic nuclear bomb, America will respond with an overwhelming, devastating nuclear counterattack. Keeping that in view, North Korea will certainly go full-blown attack if it decides to go nuclear.
Number 1.
The effectiveness of EMP will vary depending on the target resistance capability against electromagnetic pulse, and the impact is hard to foresee. So there's no point in using a perfectly good nuclear weapon to be used as an EMP weapon whose effectiveness is suspect when it could totally destroy a city in original form. This scenario is especially true for North Korea as it has limited number of nukes. In any case, it's unlikely that North Korea would show any restraint if the United States intervened to overthrow the regime in Pyongyang. 6 years after Mr. Kim took power, he began slaying those who challenged his rule, sometimes with an anti-aircraft gun, clearly demonstrating his brutal nature. Kim's endgame is all about seeking to stay in power. Any threat to his rule as the third-generation strongman in a family dynasty that took hold after World War II will result in all-out retaliation. In that scenario, Kim will certainly go for full-scale nuclear strike instead of using nuclear EMP.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this. Hit the like button if you find the video interesting, and kindly provide your feedback in the comment section. This will help us improve.